Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Dave Kinzler. Dave is the CEO of 1-to-1 Health, an innovative healthcare provider focused on lowering healthcare costs one patient at a time. Dave, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before I ask you what the bigger challenge is, working on Capitol Hill or working in healthcare, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Well, Mike, thank you very much for having me. This morning I'm drinking a Pike Place from Starbucks. You know, it's a not that interesting, but it's a staple of mine and always pretty consistent.
What's really interesting about it is they already got their Christmas cups out.
Oh, they're ready.
Oh, man, red and green already, and it's not even Thanksgiving.
Before Thanksgiving, I'm embarrassed to admit we have our Christmas decorations up at home.
Do you really?
Yeah, my wife, she doesn't like to put out all that effort to only enjoy it for a few weeks. So right after Halloween, the skeletons come down and the wreaths go up.
Wow. Do you guys hire out? Can you come down to my house and do that? Because I absolutely hate that.
I am not that productive in these efforts. So, you know, I spent Sunday cooking meatballs while everybody else put up the Christmas decorations.
I like that. Do you do Sunday meal?
We try to. You know, we've got 4 kids, and so they're all spread to the winds, and we try to. I think about my own childhood, and both my parents worked and commuted about an hour and a half each way, and we always had dinner at the dinner table. But I feel like today kids are more scheduled than when I was a kid. It's absolutely hard to do, and I feel like we're missing something there.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And meatballs, do you have some Italian blood in you for meatballs on a Sunday?
I am German. My wife is half Italian.
There you go.
And so that's where it comes from. But I was not allowed to put the ingredients into the bowl, but I was allowed to form the meatballs. And I had some help from a 3-year-old, so there were some misshapen meatballs, but we got
it. Those are the best ones.
Absolutely.
And you know, putting up Christmas decorations in the fall and the smell of meatballs cooking.
It was pretty good.
That doesn't get much better.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, and welcome to Chattanooga, because I know you're not from here. Born in New York City?
Born in New York City, and then we moved out when I was 1-2 years old, and so I really grew up in Connecticut, a suburb of New York. So my parents were taking the Metro North train line in every day to work in the city.
So they both worked in the city?
They both worked in the city. Yeah.
What kind of work?
So my father was an attorney, a litigation attorney. And then my mother was the chief of staff for the Environmental Defense Fund. It's an environmental advocacy nonprofit. That sounds
like they're pretty smart people.
They were. I was lucky to have that kind of base of support growing up and see what they were able to achieve, and it kind of became expected to achieve academically and follow in some footsteps that they set.
You know, I think people are a good part of the country that does not grow up on the East Coast, and particularly that New York corridor in Connecticut, that has an image of growing up in that area that is probably not as true. They don't think it's as common as like our life is here. What is it like growing up in the suburbs in Connecticut?
Yeah, it's not that different than here. It's still, it was a small community where most people know each other and everybody loves their community, is supportive of each other. And for me, it was an idyllic childhood. You know, I went to public school the whole way through. Everybody goes to some of my best friends in the world. I was in Sunday school before, in preschool at the church. Actually, so my oldest friend, his name is Matt. I probably met him when I was 2. At that church, I think, and he married my wife's first cousin. They met at our wedding. But that core group of friends has stayed with me through my entire life. And I think I watch my sons here, and I can see them forming the same relationships with their classmates.
Well, to your point of similar to me in Memphis, I'm very close to all the guys I grew up with, and probably one of my wife's closest friends married one of my closest friends. It allows you to have that relationship the rest of your life, which is great. But to your point, I don't think when people hear you grew up in New York or Connecticut, they're thinking big metropolitan, you're in the city. And the reality is there's a bunch of little hamlets and little villages that people live in and grow up in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up in the city, I think would be a very different experience, but it's not that many people that are able to do that.
Yeah, too expensive.
Absolutely. So somebody said to me recently, how people in New York show their money? It's by having kids.
That's a great point. The thing I always heard about New York is there's two ways to live in New York. You've either got to be really rich or really young.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where it doesn't matter to you. So typical growing up, what kind of sports you play? And that kind of.
Yeah, I was always soccer, switched around in the winter a little bit, and then baseball. So soccer and baseball were my primary sports. I started playing hockey, and I loved hockey.
Yeah.
And then my mother was able to, she's not a big fan of contact sports. And so she's smart, so she didn't just tell me not to do it. She got me I'm tall, so she got me invited to an AAU basketball team. And I thought I was a big deal, so of course I stopped playing hockey and went to go join this AAU basketball team where I sat on the bench and was no good at basketball. And then when I went to high school, the team saw my size and say, hey, you want to come out and try tight end? I was interested in it, and then got me involved in this soccer training program. So I thought, I had aspirations of playing soccer or baseball in college. Probably quarter away, I think sophomore year of high school, I realized that was probably not going to happen. And so I switched over to rowing. I looked at the guys that were getting recruited for rowing, the schools they were going to, and said, well, I can do that. And that was successful. So I ended up rowing all 4 years in college.
So what did you want to be when you were growing up as a kid? I mean, were you that sports focused and saw yourself as the next center fielder for the Yankees, or?
I definitely had aspirations of playing first base for the Yankees, without a doubt. Yeah. I grew up, Don Mattingly was my favorite player, and I have these vivid memories of the stadium chanting Donnie Baseball.
Donnie Baseball.
But that sophomore year, I realized, it's not going to happen. And probably ever since I can remember, I wanted to join the military. From being, I was that little kid that was super interested in history, that was reading everything he could about everything, World War II, the Civil War, fighter jets, tanks, anything I could get my hands on, watching, any movie on the subject, and just always fascinated by a military career. And so I knew pretty early on that's what I wanted to do.
Well, that's got to be a benefit for you in moving here with all the Civil War history, particularly you live up on Lookout.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's just a wealth of information.
Yeah, when we first visited Chattanooga, just driving down Missionary Ridge, it's amazing to see the history that's all around us.
Oh, you see the cannons and the markers, and they're in people's front yards.
Absolutely, absolutely.
For people who have always lived here, and if you move here, that's highly unusual.
Oh,
to see a cannon in someone's yard.
Yeah, and then you read the obelisk and you see what happened there, and it's very surreal to think it was just in our community.
Yeah, and honestly, not too long ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a couple hundred years. Now, one thing I'm very curious of your growing up is you rode a bike across the United States when you were 15. Were you running away, or what was the deal?
I did. My mother was always very supportive of trying new things that got you out of your comfort zone. She always told the story of how my grandmother, her mother, pushed her to try a marching band. And so it was, hey, for my mother, it was, I'm not interested in this, or maybe I'm interested in this, I don't know, I'm not comfortable. And it was, go try a marching band. And she's got a story of how that was formative for her. And so when I was 13, we found one of these summer camps that was kind of outdoor adventures, and I started doing those in the summer. And they're
like Knowles or something like that.
Yeah, it's the company's called Overland Summers,
okay.
And it's a smaller. It's very similar to Knowles. It's a much smaller version of Knowles, and it was actually founded by a guy who right after college rode his bike across the country, and so he said, I'm going to build a company for kids to do this, and it was
what a great idea.
Absolutely. And so they called it the American Challenge, and there were trips before that you could do to kind of warm up to that one, and you had to be at least 15 to do that one. And so when I turned 15, I did it.
Did you do the warm-up trips?
I did. So I did one which was hiking and mountain biking in New England, and then I did a mountain biking. That was when I was 13. I did a mountain biking trip out west in Moab in Utah. When I was 14, and then at 15, I rode a bicycle across the country. Started on Tybee Island in Savannah, Georgia. Okay. We took our bikes down to the beach, and we dipped our rear wheel in the Atlantic Ocean. And this, it's like 6 in the morning, and this guy comes out of his beach house on Tybee Island and walks over to me and says, "What are you doing? You look a little weird." And I said, "Oh, we're about to ride our bikes across the country." He just pulls out $20 and hands it to me and goes, "You're going to need this."
Oh, that's funny. the warm-up trips, was that just something you did over the summer, or how long were these trips?
Yeah, they were over the summer. So, the first one when I was 13 was probably 2 weeks. The next one might have been 3 or 4 weeks. And then to go across the country, it took 6 weeks.
6 weeks. So tell me a little bit about that. What were the positive things? What were the things you're out there and you're riding in the rain and you say, what the heck have I done? I mean, and what were the lessons you walked away with?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it was certainly formative for me. I'll start with the last one of what did I walk away with. I think you walk away with this perspective of you can do not only can do hard things, like you can do things that you never thought possible, right?
You can do anything.
You can do anything, right? Like like Mike, if you wanted today to say, hey, you know what, I want to ride a bike across the country. You could, give yourself a little bit of training time. By next summer, you could do it. It is achievable. And I think especially for kids in those formative teen years, showing them and demonstrating what it is that's achievable for them gives you this perspective to look back on and say, I can do anything. I mean, you look across the world and you see these amazing things people are doing, but they're just people. Yeah. And you can do them too, should you choose to. And so I think for me, that was the primary lesson that I walked away from. And then doing it was just, honestly, it was a great time. It was, 12 high school kids. We had these.
Was it all boys or was it?
No, it was mixed. It was a mix. It was male and female. Everybody made it across. And then there were two, leaders who were, at the time, you're looking at them, I look back and they were college kids.
Yeah. And they're entrusted with all these 15-year-olds riding across the.
Yeah, with no support vehicles. So we just.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just carried everything on our bikes and went across.
So would you camp out at night, or did you have a designated place to stop, like in a church gym or something?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was, both of those. And so we would map out in the morning about how far we wanted to go.
Now, wait a second. You would map out in the mornings? It wasn't all planned?
Oh, no.
It was just,
you don't really know, right? How far are you going to get?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Are you going to get a flat tire? Is something going to fall? And so the main route we followed was broadly Route 66, which broadly parallels I-40. You don't want to ride a bike on I-40. No. But Route 66 you can.
And what a cool route to follow.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's just amazing stuff all the way down. And so what we would do is we would get up in the morning, you'd have our breakfast, you pack up all your stuff, and you would try to ride until the heat of the day, so maybe 1 o'clock, and then we would go to a grocery store. That's where we would stop, and we would buy lunch, which we'd eat there. We'd buy dinner and the next breakfast, and then we would plot out where we wanted to get to. We'd ride there, cook dinner, sleep, and do it again. And so we, the grocery in the South, we were stopping at Piggly Wiggly's, which I had never seen growing up in the North. And
you weren't familiar with the pig?
I was not. I have this vivid memory of sitting outside of Piggly Wiggly eating lunch and, wearing spandex with a weird bike full of equipment. And this guy, the guy sitting on a bench next to me, looks over at me and goes, what are you doing? And I said, I'm driving, I'm riding my bike to California. He goes, you know how many miles I got on this bike? I was like, no, I don't. He told me some extreme number. I said, every day I ride to the Piggly Wiggly, back home, to the Piggly Wiggly, back home. He was very unimpressed with going across the country.
You ain't from around here, are you, son?
Exactly.
What a great experience. Was there a time, I guess what I'm looking for is, was there a time that really sticks with you that you said, man, if I hadn't have done this, I wouldn't have seen whatever?
I would say there's two parts that pop into my head. First, just how welcoming people were to us. So you asked where we were staying at night. Yeah. We would try to map out a campground, but what we would do, this was before cell phones, or at least before cell phones were ubiquitous. And so we were, before the iPhones, probably pre and post iPhone, we would stop at a payphone and we would kind of map out where we thought we were going to stop. And we would look for a local church in that town, and we would call them and we would say, hey, we're looking for a campground. And they would always say, well, come.
Oh, we have a gym.
Exactly. And so we would show up, and in some places, they would have the whole church come out, have a barbecue for us. You'd show up there. There would be 50 people there, all welcoming us.
And this is, you're just doing it on your way. It's not like the organization that put this together had this plan.
Oh, no. And they had no idea who we were. It was just a phone call.
And your parents let you do it.
Yeah, odd thinking back to that. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do it with my sons one day. There's a sad side to it in that Overland doesn't do this trip anymore. They just stopped it 2 years ago. and it's because of texting and driving. So they've had kids get killed recently. But
at that age, it had to be extremely formative to you just to see, because you brought up people and the way people respond and how helpful people are. That had to really form what you think of people across the country, because you're born in the Northeast Corridor, which has its own little bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then, obviously the people in the South were incredibly welcoming. But then you get out into the Sierras in California, and I remember, we're trudging up the Sierras, and this guy kind of leans out his window and says, because we look weird, and he goes, "What are you doing?" We told him.
That's the third time you've been asked that.
Oh, absolutely. And he says, "Well, come stay at my house." And we did. We all stayed. He, put us all up in his living room and cooked dinner for us. We went, we did camp out quite a bit, but that gets a little grinding.
That's hard.
So I believe we were also maybe in Nevada. I'm not sure where we were, but it was out west, and it was raining, and that just kind of, you're out there all day just soaked. And so by the end of the day, I'd really like to stay under a roof, and so we stopped at a YMCA, thinking like, well, maybe could you still stay at YMCA? So that was a thing. It was not a thing. And so the guy at the front desk was like, well, no, we don't do that, but you can stay at my house, and also kind of, let us all stay at his house.
That shows you how welcoming people are. And we got a lot more to cover, but I want to finish up the bike. Would you put your rear wheel in the water at Savannah? So obviously you're going to the Pacific Ocean, you're going to put your front wheel in. Where did you end up? And tell me about what it felt like to finish.
Yeah, the Santa Monica Pier in LA, which was by far the heaviest traffic that we had on the whole route. That was maybe even the scariest, just traffic-wise, riding down to the Santa Monica Pier in LA.
I bet it was.
But you come out of the mountains in LA, and you kind of crest the mountains, and then you see the Pacific Ocean. And that was absolutely a surreal moment for me.
Yeah.
If you're just trying to do the mental math of, how did I get here? Like, you remember you started at the Atlantic Ocean. But the moment you crest those hills and look, and it's not that far from there. You're doing it. You're doing the ride right then.
Had you seen the Pacific before?
I had probably not seen the Pacific at that age.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So you guys rode down in the pier, and you take your bikes and you dip them in the water?
Yep. The guy that founded it, the story is he got to the end of the pier and he actually threw his bike off. So his is down there somewhere.
Yeah, they got tired of all the bikes washing up down there. Now, you didn't ride home, did you?
No, we did not. We rode back to a hostel, and we had, when you ship a bike on a plane, you have this big cardboard box. And so they had the boxes there, and I had broke a pedal en route. And so you're clipless pedals, so you're clipping in, clipping out. And as I was getting off the bike for the last time in front of this box to disassemble my bike, I couldn't get out of my pedal, and I fell down for the first time on the entire trip. And so this is an inauspicious ending as I was lying on the sidewalk.
So the bike got the last laugh.
Yep, absolutely.
So how do you top that? I mean, you're 15, you ride across the country. You go to the Naval Academy?
Yeah, to the first part of your question, what else did I take away from it? I don't think I truly realized that idea that you can do anything. I don't think that really formed in my mind for quite a few years. And there were some other inputs into that. So you go to the Naval Academy, and suddenly you're around all these highly motivated, really smart, really fit, really capable people. You're like, wow, do I fit in here? Can I do this?
And you rode across the country on a bike. Of course you can.
Yeah, we all have these insecurities of, do I belong here? Are these people better at whatever it is I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah, a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Totally. And so I joined I was a rower, and so I was on the rowing team, and I did well at that, but I was fully focused on that. And graduated, and then I went into the Marine Corps. And then the same kind of imposter syndrome happens. At that time, the officers that were training us in Marine training were the officers that had done the invasion of Iraq and the Battle of Fallujah. And so they were young. They were 28 maybe.
But experienced.
Oh, yeah. And so, I mean, you're watching these guys walk around. Like, one of my instructors, his name is Ike Moore. He was a D1 heavyweight wrestler. He was profiled in a book called On Killing. Like, you look at this guy and you're like, that's a different thing. Do I belong here?
Yeah.
And then I showed up to my first infantry unit, and my company commander, so I was a second lieutenant, so there's typically 4 second lieutenants in a rifle company, and then 1 captain, who that captain is young as well. But he had a Navy Cross from the march up. He had cleared an entire trench line by himself with like 20, 30 people in it.
Wow.
And so was this, and then it gone to the Battle of Fallujah, did some crazy stuff there, and just a legend in the Marine Corps. And you're thinking like, still, do I belong here? Do I, can I hang? And it was probably after that deployment, when I had been in the Marine Corps a little bit, had seen more of the more normal officers, and said, okay, I can hang, I can do this. And it was at that point I was probably 23, 24 that I had developed the confidence to think, okay, no, I all these things that I've done, I really can do this.
Well, and I want to talk about that, but I also want to go back to just getting into the Naval Academy is a feat within itself, because it's not like you apply to school.
Yeah, no, you, there's a couple different steps. So if you want to go to any of the service academies, really you should start in your junior year and you apply to a thing called summer seminar, and you go spend a couple weeks in the summer pretending to be a midshipman or a cadet or whatever it is. And that's a competitive application process. So you're doing a full college type application in your junior year to go spend a couple weeks in the summer there, and they're evaluating you that whole time. And then from there, you're applying for a nomination, which typically comes from a congressman or a senator. So you're going through that full application process. And then you also go through the Naval Academy application process, which is a pretty standard college admission process. And then there's a physical fitness test as well.
Well, and you got to be smart too, right? I mean, they're pretty picky.
Yeah, they've got pretty high standards. So it was definitely my focus for quite a few years was getting into there, and I knew pretty early that's what I wanted to do. It ended up being the only place I applied, and thankfully that worked, much to the chagrin of my parents.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were never fully bought in on it to start. You know, they wanted me to look. They've got no military background.
They probably worry about you being deployed.
Oh, totally, totally. They weren't trying to hold me back from it at all, but they were not pushing it. They were trying, hey, go visit these other schools, go see what else is out there. And I was pretty certain that's what I wanted to do, and thankfully it worked out.
How old's your oldest?
My oldest is 13.
So you're coming up on. You'll be going through that same thing.
Oh, totally. And it's funny. I can already see it. There is no chance that my oldest will have any interest. But his younger brother, who's 11, I think, you can see him kind of the wheels turning. Like, I might like to do that. Well,
and you go to Naval Academy and you graduate. You're a young guy, and you're out as a first or second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant. And I think back to something like Band of Brothers. You're young guys, and you're going into a unit that's probably got more experience, and you're the young guy.
Yeah.
And you're new.
Yeah.
And you're their boss.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How do you adapt to that?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. I think the real answer is that as an officer, specifically in the Marine Corps, other services are not like this, but in the Marine Corps, when you show up to your specialty, so in my case, infantry, I have done 6 months of basic infantry officer training alongside all Marine officers, and then I have done 3 months of advanced infantry officer training at the infantry officer course, which is only infantry officers. And so you show up and you have 9 months of pretty advanced training, and so tactically you are more advanced than any of your Marines. Broadly speaking, there may be specialized experience here or there, but broadly, you are very well trained and know what you're doing day one. Now, you have to gain the confidence to actually recognize that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's aspect one. The other one that's really important is in the Marine Corps is physical fitness. If you show up and you can outrun everybody or you can outlift everybody, like, you'll be okay. You can kind of hide out for a while.
Well, and you could always say, I rode a bike across the United States.
So when you check in, there's a pretty standard process of how you check into a new unit, especially for the first time. And they go over this at the infantry officer course, and they talk to you. All right, you're going to walk in to your battalion, and the first thing you'll do is go to the battalion commander's lieutenant colonel, and you'll be in a formal uniform, and you're going to knock on the door, and you're going to say, Second Lieutenant Kinzler reporting as ordered, and you're going to come in, you're going to stand at attention, you're going to report, you're going to hand over your orders. He's going to say something brief to you, and then he's going to tell you to go meet your company commander. Then you're going to repeat that process. And then typically your company commander is going to sit down. They're going to explain their commander's intent. They're going to tell you, okay, you've got this platoon, and it's going to be a very formal, structured process. And in that course, they look at me, and they knew where I was going, and they said, for you, I got no idea, man. And so I show up. I actually didn't finish the infantry officer course because my unit was deploying, and they needed me to go out there. So I had to drive across the country in 3 days. So I had a Nissan Altima at the time. So I put everything I owned in that Nissan Altima.
Driving from where to where?
From Quantico, Virginia to Camp Pendleton, California, which is Southern California.
And you did that in 3 days?
Did that in 3 days, maybe a little less. I think it was 2.5 days.
Yeah, that's got to be 15 hours a day.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I show up, it's 7 in the morning. That first part went exactly as advertised. I knock on the battalion commander's door, do the whole thing, come to attention, et cetera. It says, okay, you're in Fox Company. Go, and so I go downstairs and I'm kind of looking at the walls to see which office I'm going to do this again. And I hear Kinzler. Somebody's just screaming my name. Go find a effing swimsuit. Well, that's okay. Say yes, sir. And go. I didn't bring a swimsuit, right? Like we're about to deploy. I've been in infantry officer training. I don't think I own a swimsuit at this point.
I didn't know we were going swimming.
Exactly. And so I come back. I go out to my car, and underneath my uniform I was wearing, they're called silkies, but they're the old Marine Corps PT shorts. They're these like short green shorts, running shorts. And so I come back. I don't know anybody. I've been there, 20 minutes. I come down. I'm walking down the hallway just wearing that. I have no idea what I'm doing. And John Tosh walks out of his office, and he looks at me and points. He goes, "We're going to the pool." And he just walks right by me. Doesn't say hello. And behind him, the other lieutenants who they were all ahead of me. So they'd already been out in the unit for a couple months. But I have no idea who they are. They kind of shuffle in line behind him.
Yeah.
And we're all going to the pool. And so we go to the pool, and at the pool, there's a man and a woman who are clearly not Marines because they are like full body tattoos, but they're clearly very fit. And they later learned that they were CrossFit athletes from Mountain Town. And so he had brought them in and he had designed a workout. He took a bunch of 10-pound weights and threw them into the deep end of the pool, which was maybe 15 feet deep. It was deeper than a regular pool because it had a really high dive. And the workout was you dive down, grab one of those weights, and you come up on the other side. And if you do it in one breath, down to the bottom, up and surface on the other side, you have to do 12 burpees, or on one side it was kettlebell swings, but 12 burpees or 12 kettlebell swings. But if you come up early, if you can't make the width of the pool in one breath, you have to do 24. And I think there's 12 rounds of that. And so we go into this workout, and I did okay. And so I didn't beat him or the CrossFit athletes, but I probably beat the other lieutenants. Yeah. And so maybe not by much. And he just fist bumps me and goes, "Welcome to the team." And that was my entry. And so I think probably what he's trying to test was, are you comfortable in uncertainty? Yeah. Do you have physical grit? Do you have mental grit? Yeah. Can you perform can you perform on demand when asked, having no idea that you're going to do this?
Well, and he threw you into the fire before you had a chance to get acclimated. You show up and everyone's told you this is the formal process, and you got one step into it and they throw you into the fire.
Totally.
I would imagine when you got deployed, that had to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, comfort and uncertainty is at the point of impact, at the brass tacks level of if you're in a firefight, just think of all the inputs that you have and all the external inputs. You don't know where your people are. You don't know where the enemy is. You've got the internal inputs of fear, and you need to act, and how do you step back, think, what do I need to do? I don't have all the information. What resources do I have available to me? And what do we do? And you have to be able to step out of that chaos, make a decision with 80% of the information, maybe. Yeah. And then in the Marine Corps, you say execute it very violently. So the common adage is a decision made with 80% of the information executed violently is always going to be better than one where you wait for 100% of the information.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the mistake a lot of people make just in everyday life is waiting on all the information. Totally. And paralysis through analysis.
Yep.
Yeah, gets you out. And you were deployed 4 times.
4 times. Yep.
Where's that take you? And not necessarily the deployment. You've been deployed. You're in the Marines, and then what's the next step in your career?
Yeah. So for me, that kind of gave me the confidence of, okay, I've been there, done it. I've seen it. I've checked that box that I always wanted to check since being a little kid.
Well, let me ask you real quick on that. Yeah. As a little kid, you were always fascinated with military history. When you're actually in it, was it markedly different than what you expected, or more of what you expected?
I would say it broadly aligns with the common themes that you would expect and glean from reading and movies. And yeah, the people do a pretty good job of portraying their experiences. And so, yeah, I would say it was not.
So you didn't walk away and go, man, I lived my whole life thinking it was going to be like this, and it was nothing like that.
Yeah, no, I would say it was broadly as advertised.
Well, that's good.
And so, but my next job, after you deploy a bunch of the times, the Marine Corps will send you to it's called a B billet, but a non-deployable billet, a role in which you're not going to go overseas. And so, I had applied to be a congressional fellow, where they put you on the staff of a congressman for 1 year. So I did that, and then you have a payback tour of.
Who'd you draw as your congressman?
Walter B. Jones from Eastern North Carolina.
Wow.
He passed away a few years ago, but he was a unique guy. So Walter Beeman Jones Jr., because Walter Beeman Jones Sr. held the seat before for 26 years. He said, my daddy held this seat for 26 years. And then, Walter B. Jones Jr. probably had it for 24 years. So, 50 years of Walter B. Jones in Eastern North Carolina. And Jones came into Congress in 94 in the Gingrich wave. And so he was your classic Gingrich Republican. And, in 2003, full supporter of the Iraq War. He's the guy responsible for changing the congressional cafeteria menu away from French fries.
Freedom fries.
He's the freedom fries guy.
That's his claim to fame.
He passed that one up. So he went. His district includes Camp Lejeune, the Marine Corps base in Eastern North Carolina. And so he went to the funeral of one of the first Marines killed. Sergeant Bintz is the guy's name. I didn't know him, but he was killed very early on in the first days of the invasion. And he went to the funeral. And Jones didn't know him either. And he was sitting there looking at the guy's family, devastated, and thinking, like, wait, what are we doing? And he had this moment of, like, why am I supporting this? Why are we doing this as a country? And so he went back to D.C., I believe he originally started talking to Chuck Hagel, who, if you remember, former defense secretary, was very early, came out against the Iraq War, and was entirely convinced, and very quickly thereafter publicly went against the president as a Republican, and came out firmly against the Iraq War, was the first normal Republican to do so. And that completely alienated him from the party for the next, 15 years or whatever it was he was in Congress. And so by the time I worked for him, which was 2012, he kind of operated in his own world where he was not really welcome in the party still. And over time, that alienates you. And so he was never working on the big issues, but he was very effective on constituent issues and his passion projects. And so we would work on these issues that would have a lot of effect for the people of Eastern North Carolina, or even individuals if he felt they were wronged.
Can you imagine how that moved his conscience? Here he was a supporter of the war. He goes to the funeral of one of the first Marines killed, and to have that enlightenment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he voted for the war, right?
Yeah.
And so he
absolutely,
why? Yeah, absolutely. He would apologize, every day.
Had to be an interesting guy to work for.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, because he was unburdened by any of the normal political.
He didn't care.
Yeah, my daddy helped the seat. He's Walter B. Jones. He's going to get the seat, right? And so he doesn't. He's not raising money. He doesn't care. And so he's just doing what he thought was right.
What a fresh perspective.
It was, and the thing for me, which was empowering, was he let me, as soon as I demonstrated I was capable. He had his own version of the pool swimming workout test. When I showed up, they realized that people that call the office after hours, they thought it would just ring and go to a voicemail saying, hey, we're closed, call back during these hours. In actuality, people had been leaving voicemails, but they didn't know where these voicemails had gone. And so they found hundreds of voicemails that constituents had left that they had no idea. And they said, hey, can you figure this out? And so I listened to, hundreds of voicemails, which ones need to be responded to, what's the issue, who needs to be who needs to respond on the staff, what's the contact information, here's a link to the voicemail, here's what you should say. And it took probably 2 weeks to sort through these things, but then gave it out, and it was, well done. And so that enabled me to get more tasks, and over time showed I was capable. And so he let me run. His biggest passion project at that time was he was always very centered on the Marine Corps, because
it was in his district.
Exactly. And there's an aircraft, the V-22 tilt rotor Osprey, And in the development, it's still relatively controversial, but in the development of that aircraft, there was a crash where I believe it was 22 Marines were killed.
I vaguely remember that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in the investigation, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but broadly, the Marine Corps blamed the pilots. They said this was pilot error. And the pilots, of course, were dead.
Can't defend themselves.
Exactly. And they, rushed it through production and purchased the aircraft, and Marines flying it today. But it's a tilt rotor, so it's, it takes off vertically, it flies horizontally. It had never been done before. And so the wives came to Jones, they were in his district, and kind of showed him the evidence, et cetera, et cetera. And he made, this was, for a while, this was his life's work, was getting the Marine Corps to retract that and apologize.
Wow. And so
he was so emotional about it that he had me, and when I joined, he had been working on this already for years. But we got it very close to the finish line when I was there, and he ultimately did get them to do it. But he was so passionate about it that he designated me as his representative to negotiate with the Marine Corps. And so this resulted in me sitting across from the Commandant of the Marine Corps as a captain, representing the congressman. Congressman was not in the room because he didn't think he could control himself.
And you're still in the Marines.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time, when he was a one-star general, I believe he's the only commandant that has been an aviator. Normally it's an infantry officer. He was actually the one-star general that oversaw the development of this aircraft. So this is just personal on top of personal. Yeah. And it was, so he gave me that leeway, that leash to run, and empowered me.
So you're a young guy. Mm-hmm. You're working for this congressman who's obviously is following his conscience. Mm-hmm. You're a Marine, and you're sitting across from the Marine Commandant. Did that change your perspective of the Marines as an organization, or how did it change your perspective overall for what you've been through and now what you're kind of seeing how the sausage is made, for lack of better?
Yeah, no, that's so it did not change my perspective of the Marine Corps. Jones was right. The Marine Corps was wrong.
Yeah,
it was not pilot error. It would be the best analogy I can give you is it's like, hey, if I took my 13-year-old son and put him behind the wheel of a NASCAR car and said, hey, head out to this race, and it's line up, and he crashes, and then I blame him for driver error. That's the best analogy that I can get.
That's a good point. Because these were new aircraft, and planes weren't designed to launch vertically.
Exactly. And the actual issue is a thing called vortex ring state, which a helicopter pilot knows and understands. And I'm not an aeronautical engineer, so forgive me when I get this wrong. But broadly, if you descend too fast in a helicopter, you can enter vortex ring state, and the helicopter loses lift and it falls out of the sky. Yeah. And so in a helicopter, I think they have a name for it, it's called glaring Jenny or something like that. But there's these huge alarms that go off in your ears if you approach vortex ring state. And you stop, and then you slow down your descent rate. They didn't know, does this happen in a tilt rotor? There's two. Yeah. What angle are they at? They had no idea. And so they had taken the Marine Corps had taken the manual from a CH-53, it's an entirely different aircraft, a helicopter, and they had put one page in the back of the manual saying hey, don't descend too fast. And they didn't know idea what the descent rate was. They just made it up. They took it from the other helicopter, put it in the back of the manual, never trained to it, never talked to the pilots about it. You put these pilots in there, and they descended into a landing zone very quickly. They had no idea they were entering. Yeah. There were no warnings, and every other helicopter, it's going off in your headset. They had no idea. They'd never thought of vortex ring state. They'd never been trained on it. They didn't even know at what descent rate it would happen. Nobody knew. And they entered vortex ring state and fell out of the sky and crashed. And so I would say it was absolutely the Marine Corps' fault. So, but back to your question, did it change my perspective of the Marine Corps? No. Organizations absolutely make poor choices. I think the intent was maybe not in that specific case wasn't great. Their intent was definitely to get that aircraft produced and out into the fleet. But more broadly, going through that process, but before I had that meeting with the commandant, the one-star general who was in charge of legislative affairs, so was opposing me in this meeting, but was actually my boss, really, came and met with me and said, hey, look, I understand we put you in this situation, and you are sitting on both teams right now, and so we understand the situation that we put you in, and go do your job.
That's nice to hear.
So it was very supportive of me. And then, looking back on it, I'm sure that 90% of the Marine Corps that knew this issue agreed with Jones, right? So like,
Yeah.
go get him.
Yeah. But, in talking about that experience where you working for the congressman and following up on those lost voicemails and then this, it's got to give you the perspective for an organization of customer service first for those voicemails, and then that all organizations have weak points and all organizations skip over details and all organizations make assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So where do you go next?
So at the time, I wanted to serve 8 years so I could get the GI Bill and get a graduate degree paid for. And so that brought that experience. I went from Jones. I had 3 more years to get to that eight-year mark. And so I went to the Marine Liaison of the Senate. And that is an office in the Senate. At the time, I was a captain, there was a major, and there was a colonel. So there's 3 officers in there, and then two enlisted Marines. And you are the representative of the Marine Corps to the Senate. And there's a mirror office in the House. And you are trying to, I believe they use the term, educate and inform on the policies and priorities of the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. Really, you're effectively a lobbyist for the Marine Corps. You're not getting paid as one. You're not registering. You can't legally lobby, but that's in the broad terms, that's what you're doing.
You're reminding them of how important it is.
These are the things that we care about. And then you travel with senators, in my case, when they go overseas on official travel. So when they would do, members of the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, the Intelligence Committee, they'll do these trips overseas to go visit American bases, meet with foreign leaders, and you will be the trip operations person. So you're the coordinator, you plan all the trains, planes, automobiles, you work with the State Department, DOD, CIA on the ground to set the meetings. They actually set the meetings and work with the host governments, but then you own the schedule, you coordinate it all, you make sure everything runs, you're the guy that's paying for the dinner bill afterwards to make sure.
So were you sleeping in YMCAs and eating at the Pig?
No, it's pretty nice. Okay, I was flying on private jets and staying in 5-star hotels when I did that job. And so that was a window in an entirely different world as well, right? We went all over the world and met with all types of world leaders.
Does something like that surprise you of how involved our country is across the world? I mean, because you go into countries you probably hadn't even thought about.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Totally. And then you see how much America actually matters to them. Yeah. And you don't. Yeah, I think that's a great point. You don't get, I probably had some of that from the Marine Corps, right? Like I remember like walking down a street in Afghanistan and, these kids are running after you've just been in a firefight, and these kids are running up to you because you're an American, and they are enamored with that, and they want to see you, they want to touch you, and it's just it's a little bit surreal. How do we carry this moral power? But then you go to the very high level of anywhere from a small Middle Eastern country to France to Malaysia, and they really, really care about what America is thinking, doing, and so you get a very up close view of the moral power that America has.
We probably don't realize that enough.
I haven't thought about it in a while. But as I'm speaking, I think the best encapsulation of that I heard was General Mattis. I heard General Mattis, former 4-star Marine general, former Secretary of Defense. While he was Secretary of Defense, he spoke at in a closed thing that I was at, and he told a story about when he was a 1-star Marine general in Iraq. There was an IED manufacturer that they were trying to get. He had killed a bunch of Americans. He was very good at his job. They were trying to get him. And it took him a while, and eventually they did capture him. So Mattis went and sat down across, the guy was detained. He sat down across from him and said, "Hey, why are you doing this?" It was very early on trying to understand the insurgency. And the guy spewed off the list of, American infidels, invaders. He says, no. Like, you're making bombs. Like, and you're the best bomb maker here. Like, you are a smart, educated engineer. You went to school here. Like, why are you doing this? And the guy kind of, broke down a little bit and basically, well, I got to feed the family. Exactly. Got to have an argument like that. So they spoke about that for a while. And at the end of this, the guy, the bomb maker, looks at Mattis and says, hey, I don't think I'm ever getting out of jail, but is there any chance that my daughters can go to America?
Wow.
And like, you think about the psyche of this guy that's sitting there going to jail for the rest of his life. His career has been killing Americans.
Yeah.
And he wants, like, his greatest desire at that moment is for his kids to go to America.
Send his kids to a better place.
Totally.
That
moral power that we carry around
Yeah.
the world, I think is, it's been earned over time, and we mess it up all the time, but it still does come through.
something we need to appreciate more.
Totally.
There's more I want to get to, and we're going to run out of time before I can get to it. But I want to take it to where you go to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which Bob Corker was chairman at that time, and how that gets you to Chattanooga.
Yeah. So in that Marine liaison job, Corker was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. So I traveled with him whenever he would travel, which was quite a bit in his role. And then at the end of that time, I was applying. I'd done my 8 years. I had the GI Bill. I was applying to graduate school, and I was going to Stanford. So I was moving across the country. It was set. I had accepted. And a guy who ran Middle East policy on the Foreign Relations Committee left originally to run Scott Walker's campaign in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yeah.
And then he ran for Congress himself and won. And he just resigned. Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin. He became a member of the House. And so Mike left, and they said, "Hey, would you come up and fill this role temporarily?" And so I did. The Marine Corps said, "Yeah, sure." I'd already dropped my papers. I was getting out, and so I did. And temporarily turned into a couple of years. And so I worked on the Foreign Relations Committee for a couple of years, delayed school, delayed again, ended up finally going. But I was in this role where you were inserted into issues that you're only going to get a chance to work on once in your life. So I did it. But I never intended to work in foreign policy or government long term. And so I left. I went to Boston Consulting Group, clean cut, was doing pure private sector work. And then it was when I was leaving BCG or trying to leave BCG that I reconnected with Corker, and I had no idea, but he had invested in a company locally, 1-to-1 Health, the primary care company. And I was looking at, hey, how do you evaluate these options I have in California? And he said, no, you come here, meet the founder, and now I live in Chattanooga.
Well, that's one of the beauties of Bob Corker. He's very direct.
Oh, absolutely.
And he will tell you, no, you need to come here and do this. So you've done all this through your career, and this opportunity come to a small town. I mean, Chattanooga's not a large city, and it's healthcare. I mean, how's all this making sense to you?
Oh, it didn't make sense when I came. Absolutely. So I joined. The founder's a local primary care physician, Keith Helton. And Keith is unique in that he knew what he was doing from a primary care perspective was different and better. And his goal was, well, how do I get this to everybody? And that's where I need help. And his original effort towards that was by bringing in Corker. Well, Corker does big things. He does great things. Like, okay, come join this. It's
probably Corker's doctor too.
He is not. They have separated keep the professional distance.
But what was he doing that was different in terms of healthcare? That he had the awakening that I need to expand this and bring down healthcare costs.
Well, I'll give you a very real example from my own house this morning. I woke up and my 3-year-old daughter had one of those hoarse coughs. And does she have croup? Is it something else? I'm coming here. My wife is trying to get all the other kids to school. And what do you do in that situation? Is this bad enough to? Okay, so she's 3, so it's probably bad enough we'll keep her home from preschool if she's been in kindergarten. I don't know, maybe do I send them? Do I not send them? How does it, is it bad enough that I got to go to a pediatrician? Do I go to an urgent care? What do I do? And so my answer, well, we'll take a video of her, send it to Keith. Like, I don't know I don't know what this is. Like, go ask Keith, and then and I'm sure that's been happening while we've been sitting here, and he's either saying like, nah, she's fine, or he's writing a script, or he's saying, hey, actually, because for breathing in this way, you do need to take her. Here's where you need to go. And that's a very small, but he's not only doing that for us, he does that for all of his patients. And then what's going to happen later today is, let's say he gave her a steroid. He's going to text my wife and say, hey, did you pick up the steroid? How's Jade doing? If Jade's doing well, my wife's going to say she's doing well. And then tomorrow he's going to text her again and say, hey, how's Jade doing? And he's going to follow that all the way to the conclusion of whatever the issue is. And so, a kid with croup or a cold or something, that seems, okay, that's great. But then take that same approach to care and put it with somebody that just got diagnosed with cancer, that is a diabetic, that has these more impactful issues. And he's doing the same thing of, okay, hey, we've got to get you in with an oncologist. Here's where I'm gonna send you. Here's why. Here's what they're gonna do. Okay, what did they say? I'm gonna call that oncologist directly. It is a very accessible, continuous approach to primary care of how he practices. And concierge doctors are doing that, but nobody else really. And so the question of how do you take that model and bring that to everybody is what he was trying to achieve. And then I got to come in, really experience it firsthand of Keith becoming my own doctor, and then have this platform of a profitable company that Keith had built that had, providers and resources, and no outside capital. So we weren't, hey, you got to sell in 5 years, here's your timeline. And then design and build on top of that. And so it has been this incredibly unique opportunity to come in and design and build with the resources to do so and the freedom to do it the right way. And that's in many ways a credit to Keith, and then now Corker, who's chairman of the board, to come in with that mindset instead of, for Keith as the founder, anytime a founder steps back and hands off the reins, typically that does not go well. He did that and has done that incredibly well. And then for Corker and the other investors, there's no, okay, hey, let's maximize EBITDA for this next year so we can trade. And it's all focused on what is the best outcome for our patients and how do we reach more of them. And if we do that, we're going to be financially successful.
What sold you on 1-to-1 in Chattanooga?
So I came down, I spent a day with Keith, and he took me around, showed me some of the primary care clinics that we operate here. And I honestly had no idea what we were doing. I was trying to figure it out. I had no healthcare experience. He was talking about fee-for-service medicine. I'm trying to Google fee-for-service medicine without him seeing me. Not that he would have cared. I could have asked him. But you could just sense from spending a day with him and seeing these clinics, like, well, this is somewhere that I would want to go to the doctor. This is an experience that I want my parents to have. This is different. And so there was that. And then there was the opportunity to lead a growing company. I think, when a door opens to you, walk through it. And that was the door that opened. And so I wasn't going to wait for what I thought was the perfect opportunity. I was going to have this.
Back to your 80%.
Yeah, absolutely. This is at the 80%, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was probably more than 80%. I didn't know that at the time, but go walk through that door and run with it.
Yeah, because you've got no background in healthcare. You really haven't been out of the Northeast corridor. You know, and all of a sudden, here you are in Chattanooga, Tennessee. How can anyone listening to this who might be interested in 1-to-1 get in touch with 1-to-1 or yourself?
Yeah. So website's just spelled out 1to1health.com. And then my email is just david.kinzler@121.health.
Great. Before I get to the last question, Dave, I do want to remind our listeners who makes all this possible. And it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, my standard last question that we ask all of our My Morning Cup guests, and I'm a little hesitant to ask you because you were so darn mature at 25, but what would you tell your 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's in whatever. Yeah, I think as a 25-year-old, you're searching for. People say find your passion, and I think that there's an element of bringing your own passion to whatever it is you're doing. And so I think the thing that I would say to my 25-year-old self is that whatever you're doing at that time, do it with the most passion and the most ability that you can bring to that thing, and that's going to bring value to it. You don't have to wait for something else to bring the value to you. I think you can bring that to whatever it is you're doing in life, and then you're going to reap success from that.
How many of those encounters, from riding your bike across the country to the Marine Corps, what are the lessons you took for that you look back now and go, oh yeah?
Yeah, I'd go back to that perspective of you can do anything. That's the other thing I would say to a 25-year-old of, don't be complacent if you want to go do something. The other thing at being 25 that I look back on is take risk, right?
Yeah.
Like you got so much. You don't feel it when you're 25. You're like, I got to do this because then I got to do this by 30. And then I'm going to be, I'd go back to 30 today. That'd be great.
Yeah, I would too.
You have so much time that
you have time to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. Go take when people always talk to me about going into the military out of college, I want to go try this. And one of the things I didn't do this, but one of my very close friends, who was one of those platoon commanders following Shantosh did. He went into the CIA, to me as a young person, like the opportunity to go be a CIA spy for 4 years, go travel around the world, run these incredibly complex, important programs. And then, hey, if at the end of those 4 years, you're like, actually, I don't like living in East Africa. I want to go live back in Chattanooga. Cool. Go live in Chattanooga. You have so much time ahead of you, but you're never going to look back on that risk and regret having taken it.
And it gives you such good lessons.
Totally.
Just stuff you'll take the rest of your life. Well, Dave, you're fascinating. I'm glad you're in Chattanooga. I think you're going to love it here. As I told you, I came here almost 25 years ago, thought I'd be here 3, and here we are.
Happy to be here, and thank you for having me here today.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Consta Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.